My name is Mark Roth, and I'm the court reporter for this deposition. My business address is 555 South Limestone, Lexington, Kentucky. We are here today, March 9th, 2016, for the deposition of Melissa Monroe. This deposition will take place in room 228 at the University of Kentucky College of Law at 7:03 p.m. Ms. Monroe, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Will the parties please state their appearance for the record?
Nathan Goins for the defendant.
Brian Stith for the defendant.
Sarah Tipton, defendant.
Tyler Maston for the plaintiff.
Nick Hamming for the plaintiff.
Eric Bronco, plaintiff.
Okay. So now, before we begin, let the record reflect that opposing counsel and I have stipulated that all objections, except as to the form of the question, will be reserved until trial. Good evening, Ms. Monroe. Can you please state your full name for the record?
Melissa Monroe.
Now, my name is Sarah Tipton, and I'm an attorney, and I represent Derek Dawson and Copymaster Corporation, who you're bringing a lawsuit against. Do you know the lawsuit I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever been deposed before?
No.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself and about the incidents leading to this lawsuit. If at any time I ask you a question and you don't hear it or you don't understand it, please tell me that and I'll repeat the question, or I'll ask it in a different way. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. You're sworn today with the same oath that you will take at the trial of this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
The deposition is being recorded by a video camera, but it is important for you to answer all of the questions out loud. That is, please say yes or no, or whatever your particular answer may be, instead of nodding your head or making a gesture or saying uh-huh or nuh-uh. Is that fair?
Yes.
Also, it is important for us to not talk over each other so that the record is clear. So if you would please wait until I finish asking my question before you answer, and I'll extend you that same courtesy and not talk over you. Is that fair?
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with asking me to repeat a question or explain a term if you don't understand my question. And if you need clarification, please ask me. Okay?
Okay.
Is there any reason, such as being under unusual stress, or a physical or mental condition, or being under the influence of any substances, that would prevent or limit you from giving truthful answers to my questions today?
No.
Now, before we get started with questioning, I'm going to give your attorney my business card. And if at the end of this deposition you feel like you did not answer something truthfully, or if you made a mistake, you can tell your attorney and he will contact me and we can revise the record. Is that fair?
Yes.
There you go, Ms. Tipton.
Thanks. Okay, so we're just going to start off with some background. Ms. Monroe, is your address 36 Tree Line Drive, Apartment 2, Montgomery, Moot 11234?
Yes.
And is that where you're currently living?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Monroe, you were hired by Copymaster Corporation as an entry-level sales representative on January 15th, 2009. Is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you reported your work to Derek Dawson because he was at that time and still is currently the regional sales manager?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to point you to an email that you sent Joyce Diamond on January 21st, 2009. And this email is pre-marked as Exhibit 1. So if you would, just take a look at it and refresh your memory and let me know if and when you recognize this email.
Yes, I remember.
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, is this a fair and accurate copy of the email that you sent Joyce Diamond on this date?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And Ms. Monroe, it's true that you composed this email rather than someone else on your account or anything like that?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And you wrote the email during the first week in which you were hired, is that right?
Yes.
Who is Joyce Diamond?
She's a friend from high school.
Okay. And isn't it true that you wrote, and you can follow along on your paper, the people are nice, the job is fun, although there's a lot to learn, and the boss is a hunk too. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So your boss was Derek Dawson, correct?
Yes.
And in this email, you said that the boss, meaning Derek Dawson, was a hunk, correct?
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that on January 21st, 2009, you found Derek Dawson to be physically attractive, and so much so that you emailed your friend about your feelings.
Yes.
Now, during the first 6 months you were employed at Copymaster, this was called your probationary period, is that right?
Yes.
And during this probationary period, did you attend internal training courses?
I did.
And during this time, you accompanied more senior sales representatives on sales calls, right?
Yes.
And you were charged with learning about Copymaster's copier products, customers, and operations. Does all that sound like a fair description of your job?
Yes.
So basically, these first 6 months were your trial period to prove yourself a valuable employee at Copymaster. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, I want to point your attention to a reprimand from Copymaster with your name on it and dated March 17th, 2009. And this reprimand is pre-marked as Exhibit 2. So, just like you did with the last one, take a second, look it over, read it, and let me know if and when you recognize this reprimand.
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, is this a fair and accurate copy of the reprimand from that date?
Yes.
And this reprimand says, excuse me, that you made 15 long-distance phone calls outside of your region. Is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that these 15 long-distance phone calls were personal phone calls?
Yes.
And by making these long-distance personal phone calls, you cost your company, Copymaster, $80. Is that right?
Yes, I paid them back though.
Okay. And the reprimand specifies that by making these long-distance personal phone calls, you violated the employee handbook. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, I want to show you an email that you sent to Derek Dawson right after this reprimand, and it is dated March 19th, 2009. And this email is pre-marked as Exhibit 3. And again, just look it over and tell me if and when you recognize this email.
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay. And you wrote it.
Yes.
In this email, you admitted that you actually made these calls, as you did just a few minutes ago. And it says that you made a stupid mistake and that you were going to send a check to accounting.
Yes.
Is that right? And you said you actually sent a check for $80.
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it true, excuse me, when you violated the employee handbook, you did this on March 17th, about 2 months after you were hired. Is that right?
Yes.
So wouldn't it be fair to say that by breaking this rule so close to the time you were hired, you were not showing yourself to be a valuable employee during your probationary period?
You could say that.
Now, the next thing that I want to point your attention to is a probationary appraisal form dated April 15th, 2009. And this form is pre-marked as Exhibit 4. So I know this is getting repetitive, but again, just look it over and let me know if and when you recognize this appraisal form.
I recognize it.
Okay. And does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy of the same appraisal form that you received?
Yes.
Now, this particular probationary appraisal form was the first one you received on the job, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And as shown by the form, your work was evaluated on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the worst, or 5 being the best, excuse me, and 1 being the worst. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And on this first form, your work was rated a 3, which is right in the middle, correct?
Yes.
So by this evaluation, you were not excelling, but your work was also not deficient. Is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true, and you can read on the form, that the evaluator commented that you need to continue to work on knowledge of product details. Is that right?
Yes.
And again, Ms. Monroe, I'm going to point you to another probationary appraisal form, and this one is dated June 16th, 2009, and the form is pre-marked as Exhibit 5. So again, take a look at it and let me know if and when you recognize this form.
Yes, I recognize it.
And does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
And again, your performance level was rated from a 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. Is that right?
Yes.
And on this date, you again received a 3. Is that right?
Yes.
So your performance did not improve from your first evaluation on April 15th, the one that we just went over, to the date of this evaluation on June 16th, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that the evaluator commented, and you can follow along with me, that you need to demonstrate more initiative and be more aggressive in your attempts to bring in new customers and get existing customers to upgrade their equipment? Is that right?
Yes.
And doesn't the evaluation also tell you that you should be initiating cold sales calls to get new business?
Yes.
So this evaluation details the things that you could have improved on in your job. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, finally, I want to point your attention to the last performance, bless you, your last performance appraisal form, and this one is dated January 15th, 2010. And this form, counsel, is pre-marked as Exhibit 6. Does this appear to be a fair and accurate copy? And just again, look it over.
Yes.
This appraisal form was created exactly 1 year from your date of hire. Is that right?
Yes.
And on this appraisal form, just like the others, you were evaluated on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst, correct?
Yes.
And on this particular form, your work was rated as a 2. Is that right?
Yes.
So under the 2 on the form, it says that your work is deficient in timeliness and or quality and or quantity, correct?
Yes.
And under the performance results, the evaluator commented that you need to be more aggressive. Is that right?
Yes.
And it also says your sales figures are the lowest of all the new sales representatives, correct?
Yes.
And finally, it says that you need to work on being more of a team player and to seek and accept assistance. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. However, my sales increased from month to month.
Okay, so it's not true that you were the lowest of all the new sales representatives?
No, that is not true. Towards the end, my sales did decrease, but that was because my biggest client went bankruptcy, and I couldn't do anything about that. And although Mr. Dawson says to seek and accept assistance from him, after I talked to Pat Spinner, he became hostile towards me in the office. He would glare at me, and if I asked him for assistance or help with my sales, he seemed to ignore me.
Okay, so Ms. Monroe, but isn't it true that even prior to the bankruptcy of one of your clients, your sales were still the lowest of all new sales representatives, statistically?
No, that is not true. My sales increased from month to month.
Okay. But isn't it also true that based on these 3 performance evaluations, your performance was only rated a 3 or a 2 out of 5 each time?
Yes, that is correct.
And isn't it also true that based on these 3 performance evaluations, your performance at work was ranked progressively lower over time?
Yes, I would like to point out though that this performance evaluation was after an incident where I had rejected Mr. Dawson, and the 2 beforehand where my score was higher was before.
Now, I want to show you your termination notice from Copymaster, and it's dated February 17th, 2010. And this notice is pre-marked as Exhibit 7. So again, just take a look and let me know if and when you recognize it.
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay, and if you could just follow along with me. The notice states that you were terminated for poor performance and failure to obey the work rules. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, Ms. Monroe, isn't it true that on January 15th, 2010, you filed a complaint against Derek Dawson to Pat Spinner, the Human Resources Manager at Copymaster?
Yes, I did.
And isn't it also true that Pat Spinner found no evidence whatsoever of your claim and dismissed it?
Yes.
Now, I want to switch gears here and talk to you for a few minutes about your friendship with Peg Mead. Peg Mead worked with you at Copymaster Corporation, is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Peg Mead is your close friend?
Yes.
But you never told Peg Mead, your close friend, anything about your interactions with Derek Dawson, correct?
Correct.
And you never told Peg Mead anything about your complaint against Derek Dawson, right?
That's right.
And when Pat Spinner asked Peg Mead about your interactions with Derek Dawson, Peg Mead said she knew nothing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Miss Monroe, isn't it true that while you were working at Copymaster, you invited Derek Dawson to your home for a dinner party?
Yes, but I did not invite him alone. I invited him along with Peg Mead and another sales representative,
What was that sales representative's name?
Sarah Lane.
Now, I want to ask about your actions after Pat Spinner dismissed your complaint against Derek Dawson. Isn't it true that after Pat Spinner dismissed your complaint, you immediately left the office in the middle of the day with Peg Mead to go to a bar?
Yes, I did.
Did you consume alcohol at the bar?
Yes, we had a few drinks.
How many would you consider a few? And isn't it true that when you left to go to the bar, you did not sign out?
That is true.
But Peg Mead did sign out, didn't she?
Yes. However, I called back to the office when I had realized I did not sign out, and my secretary signed me out for a half day.
Okay, that's actually my next question. Isn't it also true that although you were at the bar, you called the office a few hours later and told your secretary that you were sick?
Yes.
But you weren't sick, were you?
I was upset. I didn't feel well because of the way the meeting went with Spinner.
When you're sick, do you normally go to a bar?
I just went with Peg because she wanted to talk about things that had happened.
Okay. Isn't it true that leaving the office without signing out violates the Copymaster employee handbook?
Yes.
And isn't it true that calling in sick when you were in fact not sick violates the Copymaster employee handbook?
Yes.
Now, my last few questions concern your employment at Tar-Mart Incorporated. Isn't it true that you were employed at Tar-Mart Incorporated starting on March 20th, 2010?
Yes.
And this was the job you held immediately after being terminated by Copymaster, correct?
Yes.
I want to show you a copy of your resume that you sent to Tar-Mart as a part of your job application. And counsel, this resume is pre-marked as Exhibit 8. So, Ms. Monroe, just again, take a second, look it over, and let me know if and when you recognize this resume.
I recognize it.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
And did you make this resume yourself and send it to Tar-Mart?
Yes.
And Ms. Monroe, on your work history, you list Copymaster as one of your prior employers, is that right?
Yes.
And under Copymaster, you wrote that you were a sales representative and that you left Copymaster because of a lack of business, is that right?
Yes.
But isn't it true that you were in fact fired from Copymaster due to your poor work performance and violating the employee handbook?
Yes.
But you would agree with me, Ms. Monroe, that the reason you were fired was not due to a lack of business as you indicated on your resume.
Yes.
So now I want to show you a 90-day probationary appraisal form from Tar-Mart Incorporated. with your name on it and dated June 26, 2010. And this appraisal form is pre-marked as Exhibit 9. So again, just look it over and tell me if and when you recognize this form.
I recognize it.
Okay, and does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Isn't it true that your supervisor at Tarmart commented on this form that you need to be more of a team player?
Yes, that is true.
And isn't it true that your supervisor at Tarmart stated that you seem aloof or stern, particularly with senior managers, and that you need to work better with senior managers?
Yes.
Ms. Monroe, isn't it true that you have had problems working with senior managers both at your job at Tarmart and at your job at Copymaster based on these evaluation forms?
Yes, that's true.
I want to show you this employee written warning from Tarmart and addressed to you. And it is dated August 4th, 2010. And this written warning is pre-marked as Exhibit 10. So again, I know it's getting repetitive, but just take a second, refresh your memory, and let me know if and when you recognize this form.
Yes.
Okay, and it appears to be a fair and accurate copy of the same form you received.
Yes.
Do you remember the incident that gave rise to this warning?
Yes.
And the assistant general manager described in the warning, named James Jacobson, was your superior at Tarmart. Is that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that this warning states that you were insubordinate to your manager, James Jacobson, while working at Tarmart?
Yes.
And isn't it true that this warning states that you accused James Jacobson of inappropriate conduct, even though he had no idea what you were referring to?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Monroe, isn't it true that this incident shows that you had the same problem of being insubordinate to your superiors, both at Tarmart and at Copymaster?
Yes.
And isn't it true that this report shows that both at Tarmart and at Copymaster, you accused male superiors of inappropriate conduct, even though they had no idea what you were talking about?
I did accuse both of them, yes.
I'm going to show you another employee written warning addressed to you, Melissa Monroe, and it is dated November 20th, 2010. And counsel, this written warning is pre-marked as Exhibit 11. So take a second and look it over and let me know if and when you recognize it.
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay. And do you remember the events that gave rise to this warning?
Yes, I do.
Now, Ms. Monroe, isn't it true that this warning states that you left work an hour before your shift ended because you were upset at a customer?
Yes.
And this warning states that you are incapable of controlling your emotions, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it true that this report shows that you have a history based on your experiences at Copymaster and here at Tarmart of storming out of your job when you get upset?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to show you a medical excuse form that you sent Tarmart on November 21st, 2010. And this excuse form is pre-marked as Exhibit 12. So again, look it over and let me know if and when you recognize this excuse.
I recognize it.
Okay. So would you say that it's a fair and accurate copy of your excuse that you
Yes.
sent in? Okay. Isn't it true that this form documents a severe anxiety attack that you experienced while working at Tarmart Incorporated?
Yes.
And isn't it true that the severe anxiety attack occurred as a result of having a conflict with a customer?
Yes.
And do you remember meeting with Dr. Lucinda Walsh, the doctor who wrote this medical excuse form and who evaluated you?
Yes.
Miss Monroe, do you often experience anxiety attacks?
Ever since I had worked at Copymaster Corporation, from the different incidents where Dawson had approached me, yeah, I've had anxiety since then.
But this particular anxiety attack was as a result from a conflict with another person, a customer at Tarmart. Is that right?
Yes.
Is it true that this was your last anxiety attack that you've had?
Yes.
So just to be clear for the record, the last anxiety attack that you experienced was on November 21st, 2010.
Yes.
And isn't it true that you have a history of getting upset at work, so much so that it has caused you medical problems, as it happened at Copymaster and it happened at Tarmart?
Can you tell me what you mean by medical problems?
Like an anxiety attack where you had to go to the doctor?
I don't recall going to the doctor while I was at Copymaster.
Okay, so you only went to the doctor when you were employed at Tarmart?
After I left Copymaster.
Now, finally, Ms. Monroe, I'm going to show you a copy of your termination notice from Tarmart Incorporated. This notice of termination is dated December 15th, 2010, and it is pre-marked counsel as Exhibit 13. So again, Ms. Monroe, just look it over and tell me when and if you recognize this notice.
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay, and does this appear to be a fair and accurate copy of your notice of termination from Tarmart Incorporated?
Yes.
Isn't it true that the notice states that the reason you were fired from Tarmart was due to your frequent absences and your erratic behavior at work?
Yes.
And after being fired from Tarmart on December 15th, 2010, have you been employed anywhere else?
I have not.
Finally, Ms. Monroe, have you had any contact from Copymaster since the date you filed your complaint?
I have not.
That concludes the defense's questioning.
All right, Ms. Monroe, I
Do
have
we
a
want to
couple.
take a break?
Oh, yes, would you like to take a break for a
That's
second?
fine.
Would any of you all take a break?
Do we want to take a break? We can take like a
Let's
5-second
take a
break.
5-second
We'll take a
break.
5-second break.
Get stuff straightened out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to call the other witness.
Somebody know how to turn this off?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go off the record
Pause.
shortly.
See if you can pause it, Eric, without.
Let's go off the record.
Yes.